On a remote island, a village blazed fiercely in the night. The air was thick with the sounds of violence and slaughter. For a child, such a scene would be utterly terrifying. Yet, Yong-woo was different. He walked calmly into the inferno. A large man behind him raised a rock to strike, but a sudden gust of wind swept him away. Despite the numerous bodies strewn across his path, Yong-woo pressed on, determined to find his two younger siblings. A man ran out, falling to his knees in trembling fear, but the scene around them grew even more ominous. Lightning crackled and flashed, shattering nearby windows and lights, accompanied by Yong-woo's cryptic words. The entire village was consumed by flames. Decades later, the boy had grown into a formidable chief inspector. Today, his team was tasked with pursuing a group of bank robbers after a large-scale heist. Despite being surrounded by police, the robbers managed to escape. Suddenly, Yong-woo emerged from the robbers' getaway vehicle, creating an opening for Hai-won to shoot out the tires, halting their escape. Realizing their predicament, the driver took a hostage, but they had chosen the wrong person to threaten. With a single shot, Yong-woo dislodged a street sign, sending it crashing down on the driver's head. The hostage was safe. However, the chief was furious. They had only caught the small-time crooks, while the mastermind remained at large. Furthermore, shots had been fired in broad daylight. If the hostage had been harmed, the entire department would be in serious trouble. After a thorough dressing down, the chief assigned them a new case. Intelligence suggested that there would be a sleeper agent at a bar in District 1 that night. They immediately went to investigate, but despite their efforts, they found nothing amiss. It wasn't until closing time that something unusual occurred. The bar owner stumbled and fell into the pool. At first, everyone assumed it was a nightly prank, but moments later, he became motionless. Hai-won frantically jumped in and pulled him out. Panic rippled through the crowd, but it was too late. The bar owner was dead. Even in a suicide, there should be signs of drowning. But strangely, a look of contentment graced the victim's face. Meanwhile, in a secret chamber filled with gold, silver, and jewels, a suspicious figure appeared, inspecting the surroundings before going to the main room to report to his boss. That night, Yong-woo sketched a face and sent it to a friend, asking for help identifying the individual. Coincidentally, that person was on a plane heading to Korea. The next morning, they received another case. A male student, known for his misdeeds, including the sexual assault of a classmate, had been acquitted. Yet, he suddenly jumped to his death, a look of contentment on his face. Then, another nefarious individual, known for abusing his power and committing murder, also died mysteriously. At a meeting, Yong-woo argued that these events were connected. A dangerous force seemed to be at play. At that moment, the television aired a segment analyzing the murders. Reporter Jae-wook revealed a cipher left by the perpetrator. Yong-woo's face paled as he watched. The following day, he and Hai-won visited the hostage from the bank robbery. Strangely, the young man smelled of drugs, a legal violation given his age. Yong-woo tried using money and food to extract information. As the boy had attended the party the night the victim jumped to his death. With a few credible leads, they left to continue their investigation. However, that night, a female victim was attacked. Fearing the loss of her dignity, she chose to jump to her death. Yong-woo suddenly awoke with a start, but he found himself in a jail cell among petty criminals. It seemed Yong-woo had an unusual habit of sleeping in the jail. The inmates sometimes mistook him for one of them. His colleagues also found his behavior unbecoming of a chief inspector. Back in the meeting room, the team continued to decipher the killer's riddles. The series of seemingly unconnected cases pointed towards a hidden message. After some thought, Yong-woo deduced the location of the next crime scene. Coincidentally, the woman from his sketch appeared there as well. As predicted, the perpetrator appeared and attempted to assault the woman. She fought back, easily subduing him. However, the sound of police sirens distracted her, giving him the opportunity to escape. Yong-woo, witnessing the scene, gave chase. The pursuit led to a railway crossing. The man, wearing an expression of contentment, stood on the tracks, waiting for the oncoming train. Yong-woo tried to intervene, but it was too late. He couldn't outrun the train. The wicked man met his end. After this incident, Hai-won was deeply puzzled. The victims were all dangerous criminals, yet they seemed to commit suicide with a sense of euphoria. Seeing her stressed, Young-woo playfully threw himself down the stairs, nearly giving Hai-won a heart attack. However, the prank inadvertently triggered a realization. Searching the deceased man's residence, they discovered a suspicious drug. Analysis revealed that it induced a euphoric, almost drug-like high. Armed with this clue, Young-woo held a meeting to share his findings. He meticulously deciphered the killer's coded messages. Coincidentally, Jae-wook was on television, reporting that the recently deceased man was himself a criminal, publicly exposing his misdeeds. This was somewhat embarrassing for the police. That night, the team was out drinking when they received news. Their superiors, lacking confidence in their abilities, had hired a former FBI agent to take over the case. The team was frustrated, but Young-woo calmly reassured them. As long as we solve this quickly, everything will be fine. Their conversation was interrupted by a woman's scream outside. Team members rushed out to subdue the suspected perpetrator. It turned out to be a misunderstanding. The woman suffered from obsessive-compulsive disorder regarding cleanliness and was terrified of being touched. However, the moment Young-woo saw her, the atmosphere shifted. Lights flickered erratically. A young man seized the opportunity and fled. Assuming he had done something wrong, the officers pursued him, but lost him in the chase. Young-woo returned to headquarters, a place that felt more like home to him. He conducted all his activities there, even brushing his teeth. This annoyed the chief, but he couldn't do anything about it. Young-woo consistently delivered results, keeping the department's performance metrics high. Moments later, former FBI agent Jamie arrived. It was the same woman they had encountered several times. She immediately impressed with her insightful analysis, but didn't seem to win over the team. Afterwards, Young-woo offered to show Jamie around Korea. Hai-won, jealous, cursed and stormed off without a word. Young-woo, however, kept Jamie occupied from afternoon till night, giving his team time to work on the case. Realizing she'd been tricked, Jamie confronted him, only to be met with a taunt. A former FBI agent falls for such a simple ploy. She retorted, "Have we met before? You act as if we're close." Young-woo leaned in and pressed the doorbell of a nearby house. It was the home of the missing person. The family seemed distraught, so they left after a few minutes. Back at headquarters, Sel noticed a commonality. All the victims wore a blissful smile at the time of their deaths. Simultaneously, Jae-wook, following the killer's clues, investigated an abandoned apartment. He found a suspicious room, locked but easily bypassed with a little ingenuity. Inside, he discovered valuable clues, which he shared with his subordinates. The evidence clearly showed that the victims frequented the location. Meanwhile, Jamie experienced a flashback to her childhood, a terrifying image of the White Knight village. Recalling Young-woo's words, she reviewed the data she had collected. Knowing that Young-woo was aware of the previous victim's recent visit to a clinic and connecting it with his behavior at the crime scenes, she concluded that he might be the killer. At the same time, Jae-wook also found something through the camera footage. A shot of Young-woo appeared at the abandoned apartment, the place frequented by the victims. Young-woo was looking at the photos on the wall and took down Hai-won's picture. He mused that she was the first member of Team 1 he'd recruited. Thus, the 4-person investigation team was formed. Notably, Dong-go looked so cool on the poster, but the reality was, wham! At first glance, he looked homeless. He didn't even have the bearing of a police officer. But this unique style somehow captivated Hai-won. Back in the present, Jae-wook delivered the collected photos to Team 1, then stipulated that he wanted exclusive coverage of the case. Although there was a photo of Young-woo visiting the abandoned apartment, Jae-wook didn't hand it over, only providing images of the victims. Their commonality was that they had all visited the dilapidated apartment before their deaths. With this information, Team 1 immediately rushed to the scene. Upon arrival, they only found a suspicious laptop. All other traces had been meticulously erased. But this trip helped them confirm that the recent victims had been systematically eliminated, not suicides. Next, they discovered that the chairman of the charity foundation, Min Ho, was the next target. However, subsequent information was encrypted, accessible only with the chairman's fingerprint. Suspecting Young-woo, Jamie had him tested. But the results disappointed her. The fingerprints didn't match. However, Jamie still suspected Young-woo. She presented all her deductions, but he calmly and skillfully countered them. As he exited the elevator, he glared at her. Outside, thunder and lightning suddenly erupted. This caused a young man to panic. It turned out he was Yi Woong, a pawn in the hands of Yang Sik, a manipulator of the Korean economy. Meanwhile, the chief also learned that Chairman Min Ho was the next target. He ordered protection for him. At this time, the medical examiner also analyzed another unfamiliar fingerprint. Based on their assessment, it seemed to belong to a man with a shoe size between 40 and 42 centimeters. Hearing this, Jamie immediately measured Young-woo's foot. Indeed, his shoe size fell within that range. Just then, Hai-won appeared, calling them to a meeting. There, they recounted a case in the village of White Night years ago. Inexplicably, after just one night, all the villagers died mysteriously. The entire village burned down, leaving no trace. Coincidentally, Chairman Min Ho had also donated to a charity in this village. Could the victims in this series of cases also be connected to and sacrificed because of the White Night village? At night, Team 1 was still racking their brains over the investigation. Jae-won also went to the tech room, begging to check the cameras, but the person there kept giving him a hard time. They even bad-mouthed their team leader. Hearing this, Hai-won stepped in and taught them a lesson. At the same time, Jamie was still trying every way to prove that Young-woo was the culprit. This was inadvertently discovered by the supervisor, but her former FBI reputation wasn't for nothing. As the supervisor left, Jamie appeared behind her, greeted her, and conveniently requested access to Young-woo's personal information. Caught red-handed, the supervisor couldn't refuse and complied. Although they didn't like each other, they both had to put on a show. The next day, Hai-won invited Jamie out for coffee. It seemed Hai-won was jealous of her. However, Jamie also figured this out. Nevertheless, she warned that Young-woo was dangerous and to never trust him completely. Meanwhile, Young-woo met the blonde kid he lived with again and helped him deal with the bullies at the end of the alley. On their way back, they saw Jamie walking strangely. The blonde kid thought she was limping, but it was actually a sign of her obsessive-compulsive cleanliness. But dangerously, someone was following her. Upon entering the convenience store, Jamie encountered Yi Woong again, the young man the police had confronted due to her misunderstanding. She took the opportunity to apologize to him. Then, they awkwardly ate instant noodles together, completely unaware that someone was watching them. After eating, Jamie gave Yi Woong her contact information so she could help him if he ever had any trouble. It was a gesture of apology. Meanwhile, Young-woo sought out Soon-gu, the man who had raised him since childhood. He seemed to be a seasoned researcher, surrounded by experimental equipment. He recalled a time years ago, while chatting with a neighbor, when Young-woo had suddenly appeared and collapsed in the street. Feeling pity for the boy, he reluctantly took him in. At the same time, Jamie realized she was being followed. With her FBI instincts, she quickly subdued her pursuer. Coincidentally, Young-woo, strolling nearby, heard the commotion and rushed over to investigate. Taking advantage of the surprise, the stalker threw sand in Jamie's eyes. Young-woo then escorted her home. There, he revealed that he was from White Night Village. Upon hearing this, she was stunned, because she too was originally from White Night Village. Fortunately, she had escaped the tragedy that night and was found and adopted by an American general. The horrific trauma from her childhood had erased most of her memories. The only thing that remained was the phrase, "I saw a monster." Immediately afterward, Young-woo excused himself to the bathroom. Disturbingly, as he looked at his reflection in the mirror, his body suddenly convulsed with excitement. The mirror cracked significantly. Hearing the strange noise, Jamie rushed in to check. He simply claimed he had slipped and offered a cursory apology. The next morning, learning that Young-woo had spent the night at Jamie's, Hai-won was furious, giving him a good morning punch. The impact was so powerful he saw stars. Outsiders might think they were romantically involved, but in reality, Young-woo and Jamie suspected each other. Each believed the other could be the culprit. Later, at a meeting led by Hai-won, they discussed plans to protect Chairman Min Ho remotely. Team 1 was assigned to discreetly monitor the situation to avoid alarming anyone. However, the two continued to voice their suspicions of each other. Meanwhile, Jae-wook was racking his brains trying to figure out why Young-woo was at the abandoned apartment earlier. He contacted Hai-won and arranged a meeting. The next day, Team 1 planned to extract information from Min Ho's subordinates to identify vulnerabilities the perpetrator might exploit. Jai-won was in charge of posing as a business partner. However, his ruse was discovered. Seeing the precarious situation, the team worried that the plan would fail. At this point, Hae-won, disguised as an employee, snuck into the lawyer's office to gather documents related to Min Ho for investigation. Following a colleague's instructions, she finally cracked the password and copied the information onto a USB drive. Meanwhile, it seemed Jae-won had been exposed, but he inadvertently moved closer to his target. This caused the lawyer to become instantly flustered. It turned out he was gay. But time was running out. The lawyer returned just as the data finished copying. Fortunately, an employee announced an emergency meeting, allowing Hae-won to successfully complete her mission. At the same time, Jamie was meeting with the medical examiner for more information. The examiner pointed out that the victim's symptoms resembled a condition called lucid dreaming. It made drug users believe they were dreaming, leading them to do crazy things, including suicide. Simultaneously, an organization called White Knight was revealed. It included everyone from the Blue House Secretary General to various ministers. They seemed to be plotting something. Meanwhile, Jae-wook warned Hae-won to be careful of Young-woo, but she steadfastly refused to believe her team leader was the culprit. Coincidentally, he was also hanging out at that convenience store. After returning, he noticed something strange about Jamie. Suddenly, terrifying childhood memories flooded back. The monster, in the form of a child, reappeared. This caused her to collapse. Fortunately, Young-woo appeared just in time to catch and comfort her, stabilizing the situation. After she regained consciousness, they started eating instant noodles together. This scene was witnessed by Hae-won, who had just returned. The atmosphere became incredibly tense. Seeing this, Jamie excused herself to the restroom. Inside, Hae-won was seething with jealousy, nearly causing him to choke on his lollipop. At that moment, the team was carefully patrolling around Min Ho's house. The planned time of the attack was only minutes away. Hae-won was also tasked with scouting the back gate. Suddenly, a nearby bomb exploded, knocking her unconscious. Two of her colleagues, startled, rushed to check on her. Jae-wook arrived shortly after and began reporting to the media. Bombs continued to detonate relentlessly. The fire department struggled to reach the scene due to difficult access. Upon arrival, Young-woo instructed Jamie to find Hae-won, taking on the responsibility of rescuing the other victims himself. Inside the mansion, Min Ho had fallen unconscious. His housekeeper, panicked, didn't know what to do. In a decisive moment, Young-woo plunged into the inferno. Meanwhile, Jamie was suddenly ambushed, subdued, and taken away. Fortunately, Hae-won regained consciousness and rushed to the scene, but no one answered her calls. Hearing that the captain had entered the burning building, coupled with the earth-shattering explosion, she was overcome with despair, fearing for the life of the man she loved. Memories of their happy moments brought tears to her eyes. But in a flash of insight, she realized the house had a bomb shelter. However, her superiors insisted that even if there was a shelter, there wouldn't be any oxygen inside. Driven by the belief that Young-woo was still alive, Hae-won recklessly commandeered an excavator. The rescue team, seeing her determination, joined in to help. Just minutes later, they discovered survivors, and there, emerging from the wreckage, was Young-woo. Their eyes met in a moment of overwhelming joy. The chief, witnessing the reunion, was overjoyed. Despite his dislike for Young-woo's personality, he still cherished him like a son. Meanwhile, in a distant hospital, Jamie was restrained by guards. Having just regained consciousness, she was still weak. She was quickly forced back onto a hospital bed and drifted back into unconsciousness. At the same time, Young-woo was being treated in another hospital. News of his heroism was spreading rapidly. Jae-wook visited him, bringing urgent news, a clue connecting the recent series of cases. They had all been printed from the same printer, a type used within the police department. Young-woo confidently asserted his team's trustworthiness. However, Jae-wook presented further evidence. Jamie had mysteriously disappeared the previous night, and her movements coincided with the recent incidents. He had also discovered that Jamie came from the White Knight village, and her motive was revenge against those who had destroyed it years ago. He shared this information with his team, sowing seeds of suspicion about Jamie. Meanwhile, Jamie awoke from her drugged sleep. Before she could struggle free from her restraints, the doctors injected her with more sedatives. Unaware of these events, Young-woo's team was enjoying a relaxed stroll in the hospital grounds. Suddenly, Hai-won asked Young-woo if he liked her. The question caught him so off guard he nearly choked on his lollipop. Embarrassed, she quickly excused herself. Coincidentally, the suspect in the case also showed signs of regaining consciousness. But upon making eye contact with Young-woo, he was seized by fear, convulsing and dying in agony. It seemed he was harboring a terrifying secret. Outside, Jae-wook showed Hai-won some crime scene photos. They showed Young-woo at the scene the night before the incident. Recalling Jamie's warnings about him, she began to have doubts. At that moment, in the hospital, Min-ho was stabbed. Hearing the commotion, Young-woo rushed to check on him, but the attacker had already escaped through the balcony window. Simultaneously, Hai-won, driven by her suspicions, went to Jamie's residence. There, she discovered a wall covered in documents related to the case, including a picture of Young-woo added to the list of suspects. The next morning, forensic doctor Do-ra shared her suspicions with Young-woo. Based on the analysis of Min-ho's wound, it was highly likely that he had stabbed himself. Armed with this clue, he confidently presented his analysis to the team. Min-ho had no way to deny it. His motive was to increase police protection, specifically from Hai-won, under the watchful eye of the talented Chief Inspector Young-woo. Meanwhile, the TV was broadcasting an interview with the housekeeper, who had miraculously survived. According to her account, in their most desperate hour, Young-woo had appeared like a god. Using his survival skills, he had braved the flames. Then, guided by the housekeeper, he descended into the bomb shelter. He even managed to save another person, despite the lack of air inside. Remarkably, Young-woo remained calm. He cut his hand and poured his blood into a large quantity of hydrogen peroxide, creating oxygen for everyone to survive. This almost fairy tale-like story quickly spread throughout the country. That night, Jamie woke up in the hospital. Finding no guards around, she struggled to her feet and slipped outside. Despite her weakened state, she made her way to the main road. Fortunately, a kind stranger took her to a nearby police station to rest. Watching the news report on TV, she noticed something strange. How could Young-woo have known about the bomb shelter in the mansion, anticipated the lack of air, and brought a large amount of hydrogen peroxide with him? It seemed highly likely that Young-woo was the true culprit. Although Jamie informed the chief, he refused to believe her. Young-woo was his most trusted subordinate. At that moment, Young-woo was guarding Min-ho's house. But after a while, Jae-wook felt something was amiss. He suddenly fell unconscious, as did the other guards. Realizing the water bottles were contaminated, his mind raced. He remembered that Young-woo hadn't drunk from the bottles, instead using tap water to quench his thirst. Without hesitation, Jae-wook helped Min-ho escape into the forest. But they hadn't gone far when Min-ho began complaining. Suddenly, Young-woo appeared behind them, as if he knew they would flee into the forest. It turned out Min-ho had concealed crimes committed in White Knight Village. He revealed that Young-woo had destroyed the village and then lunged at him with a knife. But Young-woo blocked the fatal blow, calmly delivering a deep wound to Min-ho's neck and forcing him to reveal the mastermind behind the White Knight Village massacre. Just as he revealed the information, the police arrived. Hai-won, with her own hands, arrested the captain. The next morning, she presented her theory on Young-woo's motive, explaining that his actions stemmed from his past in White Knight Village. The police confiscated the video footage of Young-woo's actions to prevent the revelation that their hero was the perpetrator. Meanwhile, Hai-won was interrogating Young-woo. He recounted his painful past in White Knight Village. The charity organization had pretended to be an orphanage, but was actually conducting experiments on innocent children. Some children had even died as a result. But no one came to rescue them, so Young-woo had strived to survive, climbing the ranks to become a chief inspector, waiting for the perfect opportunity for revenge. Before the interrogation was complete, the prosecution arrived to take him away. The Blue House Secretary General, Young H-won, personally intervened. The superintendent was forced to give Team 1 a temporary leave, offering them 10 million won each for their silence about Young-woo. The chief, distraught, didn't know what to do, despite Team 1's pleas to help their captain. The following day, Jamie visited the detention center where Young-woo was being held. She asked him directly, "Young-woo, did you order my brain surgery?" He responded by saying that she had caught the criminal and should return to the US and rest with her family. Meanwhile, Hae-won met with Jae-wook to inquire about White Knight Village. In exchange, she offered him exclusive information. It seemed she still didn't believe the captain was the culprit and was actively investigating to uncover the truth. Elsewhere, the Blue House Secretary General, Young H-won, was planning something. Hae-won's mentor, Yi-do, was also present. As night fell, someone attacked Young-woo. Despite being ambushed, he easily fought back. Suddenly, the lights began flickering and the door slammed shut. Young-woo's vision faded into darkness. Moments later, a group of thugs arrived. Seeing their leader unconscious, they attacked. The next morning, when the guard checked the cell, he found the thugs lying unconscious on the floor. Hearing the news, the chief was furious. However, since the TV had also broadcast Young-woo's actions, he couldn't protect him anymore. At this time, Young H-won also visited Min-ho. Almost inadvertently, he revealed that Young-woo knew the White Knight organization was still active and their experiments on children were continuing. A few days later, on the day of the trial, reporters flocked to the courthouse for interviews. Suddenly, Young-woo became dizzy, lost his balance, and collapsed. Seeing this, Hae-won rushed to him in a panic and called for an ambulance. Jae-han, the youngest team member, was also worried and asked Hae-won what was happening. However, she didn't know what was going on. Not long before, Young-woo had contacted Short Hair, asking her to search for survivors of the White Knight Village massacre. Once she found them, some force closed in and surrounded them. In a horrifying scene, she was seen crawling up the hospital wall. However, by the time she reached the rooftop, she had suffocated. From this, Young-woo learned that the White Knight organization was still active. Afterward, he searched for the children of those connected to White Knight Village. Hae-won was the first person he wanted to recruit. Even the chief was stunned when he saw her impressive record. Hae-won could single-handedly take down a whole gang of thugs. Although she was only a traffic officer, she had a fiery temper. Anyone who rubbed her the wrong way would get a face full of her car door. Back in the present, Jamie visited Young-woo. Hae-won looked devastated, unable to accept the situation. Seeing this, Jamie left to give her some space. Waiting until night, she went outside for a while. Suddenly, the two guards on duty were called away. Then, an unknown assailant attacked Young-woo. However, he had anticipated this and fought back. Despite being stabbed in the side, he completely subdued his attacker. Young-woo then realized that the White Knight organization had sent someone to kill him. Hae-won returned just then and he led her to the stairwell. They worked together seamlessly, taking down their pursuers one by one. Finally, Hae-won got a car and they escaped. However, she decided to take him back to the police station. Meanwhile, Jamie was analyzing the situation carefully. Clearly, if Young-woo wanted to kill Min-ho, he could have done it at any time. Why did he save him from the fire, then intentionally miss his larynx during the stabbing, giving Min-ho another chance at life? At the same time, the superintendent ordered Young-woo's belongings to be collected and brought to her office for safekeeping, in preparation for the investigation. Jae-han received word that Young-woo was being brought back to the station. So, Team 1 tricked their superiors into going to another office, giving Hae-won time to get Young-woo's statement. However, with a small slip-up, he easily handcuffed her and escaped outside. Realizing his wound was getting worse, he decided to quickly retrieve his belongings. However, Hae-won and Jamie were waiting. Just as things were getting tense, the superintendent appeared, forcing all three of them to hide in a locker. They didn't want to hand him over to their superiors just yet. After she left, Hae-won bandaged Young-woo's wound and carefully handcuffed him again as a precaution. However, with his experience, he easily escaped and left. Seeing his determination, Hae-won decided to trust him. But as soon as he stepped outside, Young-woo was ambushed. Still weakened from his injury, he was quickly overpowered. Fortunately, Hae-won intervened, saving his life. Taking advantage of the chaos, Young-woo slipped away from the scene. Meanwhile, Jae-wook received several disturbing videos. They showed the suspect setting fire to the mansion. Even more disturbingly, Hai-1 witnessed Director Han, seemingly normal, commit suicide. Decades earlier, the children at White Knight Village were playing together in the common playground. Some of them were fighting. Suddenly, one child collapsed. Young-woo calmly and expertly administered first aid. This wasn't knowledge a 6-year-old should have. Superintendent Hyun-hee watched with a satisfied smile. At night, Young-woo snuck into the lab to steal something. However, Dr. Y suddenly appeared, scaring him into hiding. A timely alarm saved him from being discovered. However, his actions didn't escape Hyun-hee's surveillance. When taking Young-woo back to his room, she asked him who taught him first aid. Seeing him frightened and unwilling to answer, her eyes suddenly turned menacing. Back in the present, Young-woo woke up from his unconsciousness. His foster father, Soon-gu, had provided timely first aid, and his condition had improved. That night, Yi-woong suddenly became afraid of someone. It seemed they were trying to eliminate Jamie. The next morning, Jamie returned to work. She asked Team 1 whose side they were on, the police or their team leaders. Jae-won and Seok-pil immediately responded that they were on Young-woo's side. Of course, they still believed he had a reason for his actions and was definitely not the real culprit. Hearing this, Jamie agreed and decided to trust him. The three of them then set out to find more concrete evidence. Using their police identities, they easily snuck into the nursing home, while Seok-pil hid and hacked into the institution system, adding credentials for the other two just in time to fool the security guards. A few minutes later, they arrived at Min-ho's bedside. Jamie injected a sedative into Min-ho's Roman 4 drip to force him to reveal what had happened at White Knight Village. He only knew about the children and that an organization called White Knight was performing experiments on them there. Every so often, a child would die from drug shock. As soon as he finished speaking, he fell unconscious. Jae-won panicked and tried to revive him, but Jamie calmly explained it was just a sedative. She added that she had threatened him with a lethal injection. Otherwise, he wouldn't have divulged any useful information. With a new lead, the two left the hospital. The patrolling guards didn't notice anything unusual. Meanwhile, Jae-wook called Hai-1 to watch the video of the crime scene. It was clear that the arsonist wasn't Young-woo, and it was also unclear why the director had committed suicide. Because many things were still unconfirmed, he only told Hai-1 and didn't report it to the police yet. At home, Young H-won also sensed Young-woo's presence. However, he calmly stated that he had nothing to do with White Knight Village. It was likely that Min-ho had given false information. Young-woo then asked about the location of the secret research facility. Young H-won claimed ignorance and shifted the responsibility to Hai-won's father, Il-do. That night, Hai-won agreed to take dinner to her father. However, Young-woo arrived before her. He directly asked Il-do about the secret research facility and the children's whereabouts. Seeing his reluctance to cooperate, Young-woo pressed a pen against his neck, threatening him to reveal the location and the head of the White Knight organization. At the same time, the third child from White Knight Village was being brutally beaten by Young-sik. The organization wanted to cover up information about this almost successful experimental child, so anyone he knew, even innocent people like the convenience store clerk, were being eliminated without a trace. When his pain became unbearable, Yi-woong grabbed a nearby chain, flung Young-sik away, and stumbled out into the street. It turned out that after escaping White Knight Village, Young-sik had always obeyed a child's orders. Otherwise, Yi-woong would eliminate him like the others. Looking at the pile of bodies on the floor, Yi-woong calmly ate his meal, leaving a terrified Young-sik speechless. Meanwhile, Hai-won arrived at her father's workplace. Hearing Young-woo's voice, she quickly hid. After she left, he continued to threaten Il-do. Il-do expressed his admiration for Young-woo's ability to create a formula for immortality at the age of 6. However, he didn't understand why Young-woo had erased part of it. Young-woo stated that he didn't want more children to be experimented on. However, before he could extract more information, the organization caught wind of their meeting. They couldn't let such a brilliant scientist die at Young-woo's hands, so they sent a group of people to hunt him down. Sensing the danger, Young-woo temporarily escaped. Unexpectedly, he was intercepted by Min-yi, the fourth surviving child from White Knight Village. Without exchanging words, they immediately engaged in combat. At first, Min-yi seemed to have a slight advantage. However, Young-woo's endurance was superior. The tide quickly turned. Min-yi was beaten into submission. On one side, Jamie was strolling down the street when she suddenly spotted Yi-woong unconscious on the sidewalk. Recognizing him as an acquaintance, she brought him back to the police station to rest. Everyone noticed but didn't seem overly suspicious. Meanwhile, Young-woo, safely back in England, reproached his adoptive father for not having found the third child yet. Angered, his father lashed out at him. At the same time, Hae-won returned home and discovered her father's connection to Min-ho. This reminded her of the encrypted computer from before. Acting on the thought, she went to the evidence room to try and unlock it. To her surprise, Hae-won's fingerprint successfully opened the computer. Fearing discovery, she secretly copied the data and slipped out. Overhearing a conversation between her superiors, she realized the Blue House might also be connected to the series of cases. The next morning, Yi-woong seemed somewhat unfamiliar with the police station. Seeing this, Jamie introduced him to everyone. Suddenly, Jae-wook arrived and, without a word, demanded to see Jamie. He then presented a sketch based on Young-woo's memory. The face was unmistakably Jamie's. Strangely, this was her first time back in Korea since adulthood. What exactly was the connection between Young-woo and her? Elsewhere, the blonde-haired younger brother, who had lived with Young-woo since childhood, was visiting his grandmother in the hospital when he discovered a strange object. Opening it, he was stunned by the large sum of money inside. Young-woo had left the money, hoping the blonde-haired boy could save his grandmother and quit selling illegal drugs to street thugs. Overjoyed, the young boy was speechless. Back at the police station, Yi-woong seemed to have regained his senses. He pretended to be as slow-witted as usual to deceive everyone and quietly sat outside, eavesdropping on the internal meeting. They were looking for the third surviving child from White Knight Village. They reasoned that if Young-woo wasn't the culprit, and neither was Jamie, then he was the most likely suspect. But the perpetrator was right under their noses, and they were completely oblivious. At this time, Young-woo was also searching for the secret laboratory. After eliminating most of the suspected locations, only one place remained. Arriving there, he befriended the children playing on the grounds. Children don't lie, so they told Young-woo everything. Hearing the fear in their voices, he seemed to have discovered something and quickly left. That night, Hae-won opened the files she had copied from the computer and was horrified to discover inhumane experiments on children. Her own father was one of the doctors working there. He even ruthlessly disposed of the bodies of children when the experiments failed. She couldn't believe that the father she had always respected was so cruel. At the same time, Secretary General Young H-won's son, Young Jun, sought out the blonde-haired boy. He was out of drugs and demanded more. But after receiving money from Young-woo for his grandmother's surgery, the blonde-haired boy had decided to quit selling drugs. In a fit of rage, Young Jun accidentally killed him. The next morning, Yi-woong returned to the company, threatened Young-sik, and loudly declared that from now on, he would control the body and carry out his long-held plan. Then he looked up at Young-woo's image and gave a chilling smile. As for Hae-won, after learning the truth, she still couldn't face her father. She took a leave of absence because she couldn't compose herself. Meanwhile, Team 1 was still diligently searching for information about the White Knight organization. It seemed that the victims all had one thing in common: they wore the same watch. Seeing this, the superior seemed to want to hide something and offered Jamie 10 million won to urge her to return home. However, Jamie was a righteous person. If she couldn't find the root of the truth, she would stay and investigate. At the same time, Hae-won also began to follow her father. Coincidentally, Young-woo was also tailing him. But before that, he had slipped a large sum of money to a surveillance contact to get more information on the Blue House Secretary General, Young H-won. She also revealed that the chief was being manipulated by him, which is why he couldn't clear his name. As for other matters, she would inform Young-woo later. The next morning, Yi-woong carried out the next step of his plan, eliminating those connected to the White Knight Village massacre. Following a lead, Jamie and her team also arrived at the building. However, Yi-woong had concocted a drug that induced a dreamlike waking state and gave it to his victim. This was the same method used in previous cases. The victims believed they were dreaming and took their own lives, making it difficult for the police to identify the perpetrator. Sure enough, minutes later, the victim jumped from the roof. Jamie, in the lobby, recognized the familiar silhouette but didn't think much of it as she went up to the victim's room to investigate. That night, Hai-won showed Jae-wook the recording of the Baekje organization's experiment and recounted the details of each case. After listening, he also concluded that there had only ever been one perpetrator, but he still couldn't understand the connection between the victims. Meanwhile, Young Jun, the son of the Blue House chief secretary, had been suffering from severe depression ever since he accidentally killed the blonde girl. He hadn't had a good night's sleep since. Young Hwan tried to comfort him before taking some kind of medication for his own headaches. Elsewhere, using the building's security footage, Jamie realized the suspect was Yi Woong, whom she had considered her only friend after returning to Korea. He was also the third child from White Knight Village. With this realization, she immediately booked a ticket back there. Coincidentally, Jae-wook also went there to investigate further for Hai-won. Meanwhile, Young-woo watched children playing, reminiscing about his brief, happy memories from the past. Suddenly, the children were hurriedly taken away somewhere, their faces filled with fear, but unable to do anything. At the same time, Hai-won noticed her father being picked up by someone. This wasn't his usual route to work. Curious, she followed closely behind. Coincidentally, Young-woo was also following right behind her. Down the road, they stopped where the children had been taken. Suddenly, at a bend in the road, a truck slammed directly into Young-woo. Members of the Baekje organization then swarmed in. Seeing this, Hai-won abandoned her pursuit and stopped to help him. Despite her considerable strength and ability to take on multiple opponents, she was quickly overwhelmed by the dangerous organization. In the critical moment, Young-woo pushed the truck back with his bare hands and picked up a gun, threatening the Baekje members. Unfortunately, Young-woo was injected with a sedative from behind. Panicked, Hai-won drove him away to safety. She then sought help from her friend Do-jia, who also knew Young-woo and readily agreed to treat him. However, after providing first aid, her expression turned strange. At the same time, Jae-wook ran into Jamie near White Knight Village. He questioned an old woman in the village who recounted how her staff had been eliminated by a young boy. His terrifying expression was something she couldn't forget. Meanwhile, Young-sik sensed danger from Yi Woong and reported the situation to Min-ho for instructions. However, Min-ho still needed more time and asked Young-sik to continue monitoring Yi Woong for a few more days. That night, Wai-do began the organization's experiment. The children were initially terrified, but Hyeon-hee's presence calmed them down. Chillingly, her youthful and beautiful appearance hadn't changed since Hai-won had seen her 20 years prior. Not long after, Min-ho met with Young Hwan to discuss plans to kill Young-woo. But the son's screams caught his attention, so he recommended a brilliant psychiatrist who supposedly practiced near Young-sik's place. Hearing this, Young Hwan, out of love for his son, readily believed him and contacted the psychiatrist, asking him to come and save his son. At the hospital, Young-woo discovered that Yu-ra had called the police. He didn't blame her but warned her that the people coming weren't police, but members of the White Knight organization. Sure enough, they swarmed the hospital, brutally murdering the guards one by one. Fortunately, Young-woo had already gotten Hai-won out. Knowing that Young-woo wasn't responsible for the incident, Hai-won asked to be involved in the investigation. However, fearing for her safety, he gently encouraged her to go home and then left. Meanwhile, Jae-wook was telling Jamie about the cruel look in Young-woo's eyes that night. Although he hadn't killed Min-ho outright, the look in his eyes was like he wanted to devour someone alive. At the same time, Min-yi was assigned to guard the harbor. There, he discovered the bodies of young children hidden in containers. His superiors clearly wanted him to dispose of them. Upon seeing this, his conscience was deeply shaken. The next morning, Young-woo posed as a driver and threatened the broker to reveal the location of the child trafficking exchange. Terrified, she confessed everything. With the lead, he released her and left. However, upon returning home, Young-woo received news that the blonde-haired boy was dead. After the foster father identified the body, they were furious, not knowing who the cruel perpetrator was. Based on the remaining information on the boy's phone, Young-woo realized that his client that night was the son of the Blue House Secretary General. At this time, Young Hwan was talking with Young-sik. It seemed he was planning to invite the psychiatrist over for treatment tonight. unaware that the psychiatrist was actually Yi Wung, the one who wanted to kill everyone connected to the White Knight village. Outside, Yongwoo was lying in wait. Strangely, the military also arrived, providing tight security. This was clearly not an event that warranted military involvement. The following day, Hai-won officially resigned from the police force, dedicating herself entirely to hunting down the White Knight organization with Yongwoo. Seeing her determination, her superiors couldn't stop her. Near the White Knight village, heavy rain continued, preventing boats from transporting them across. Waiting until the second night, Yongwoo discovered that the stranger was Yi Wung, posing as a psychiatrist to get close to Young Hwan's son. Using his usual method, he put a warning watch on his victim's wrist and gave him a dose of lucid dreaming drug. At the same time, Hai-won was confronting her father. She spoke of his crimes, but Yo insisted he had done nothing wrong. Once the experiment was successful, it would be a great contribution to humanity. Remembering fond memories of her kind father, she couldn't hold back her tears and sobbed. Outside the villa, Min Yi also came to talk to Yongwoo about the children. He couldn't accept the sacrifice of those innocent lives. Meanwhile, inside, Young Hwan's son experienced a lucid dream for the first time. The feeling was so real and exhilarating that he was no longer afraid. The next morning, Jae-wook reported a new murder. The killer had sent a letter to the press. With this information, he live-streamed the announcement to his audience. Everyone who heard it was startled and paid attention. Based on the killer's code that Jae-wook had just released, Yongwoo easily deciphered it and headed to the crime scene. Upon arrival, he asked his junior, Jae-won, to help verify a few things. Seeing that it was their captain on the other end of the line, both were delighted. Hai-won also returned to help the team decipher the code. They quickly arrived at the correct answer. At this time, Yongwoo was reviewing the security camera footage. Sure enough, he discovered that the White Knight group had escorted Young Hwan's son home on the night the blonde boy was murdered. He then immediately informed the foster father to investigate further. On one side, Yi Wung, following Jae-wook's livestream, discovered that Jamie was in White Knight Village. Dangerously, Min-ho also learned this news. It seems he intends to eliminate all the children from White Knight Village to extract the formula for immortality. Meanwhile, Jamie, unaware of the danger, entered the village. Terrifying memories flooded back, unsettling her. Deeper inside, vivid memories of Hai-won returned. Standing before a cooking pot, she recalled the scene of the three siblings cooking together. The eldest brother had added something to the pot and stirred it. News of Jamie's arrival reached Young Hwan. That night, he dispatched members of the White Knight organization. As expected, the boat anchored offshore vanished, and Young Hwan's son, in a half-conscious state, wandered outside. The moment arrived, and Yi Wung set his plan in motion. His every move was documented by Yang Sik and reported to Min-ho. Young Hwan's son also reached the location. In a hallucination, he killed the blonde-haired person again, then hanged himself to awaken, as usual. Fortunately, Min-ho's men arrived in time to rescue him. But as Min-ho prepared to eliminate him, he realized he'd been tricked. The person before him was the Hanin in disguise. Team 1 quickly arrived as backup. Initially, they put up a fight, but after Hai-won fired a shot, they were forced to let the police take Young Hwan's son away. Seeing his plan thwarted, Min-ho contacted Yang Sik, but even he was unaware of what was happening. At that moment, Jamie and Jae-wook were ambushed from behind. They were captured, tied up, and confined to a room, awaiting transport to the laboratory the next morning. As one of the captors reported their success to Young Hwan, he was suddenly knocked unconscious by Yi Wung. The surrounding guards were also swiftly neutralized. Yi Wung then entered, intending to confront Jamie. It turned out she had abandoned him in White Knight Village years ago. Before killing her, Yi Wung administered a dose of lucid dreaming to evoke all the painful memories they had endured. This drug was created by Yongwoo and added to the cooking pot, driving the doctors to a frenzy of self-destruction. Some even begged Yongwoo for forgiveness. Moments later, Yi Wung was about to strike, but Yongwoo suddenly appeared, intervening. The surrounding lights flickered intensely. Seeing his plan fail, Yi Wung launched into a fight without a word. Initially, they seemed evenly matched, but Yongwoo, the most successful experiment from White Knight Village, quickly gained the upper hand. Yi Woong was beaten into submission. Young-woo revealed his purpose, to protect his long-lost younger sister, Jamie. To prevent the lucid dream from driving her to jump from a building, Young-woo let Yi Woong escape. When she awoke, he revealed the truth about the past. He created the lucid dream to force the organization to confront its wrongdoings, using the dream to awaken their consciences. But deep down, they cared nothing for the children, harboring only vile desires. This led to their self-inflicted massacre, creating the tragedy. Jamie then remembered her identity as Young-woo's sister. She apologized for misunderstanding him all this time. Meanwhile, at the White Knight organization meeting, high-ranking officials within the greenhouse discussed plans to expedite the immortality experiment. They feared dying of old age before reaping the benefits. However, the last child had been sacrificed at the hands of the leader. This required them to seek out more innocent souls. At this point, Young-woo urged his adoptive father to quickly locate the laboratory. According to his judgment, they seemed to have narrowed down the area somewhat, but pinpointing the exact location remained difficult. So, Young-woo came up with the idea of calling Young H-won, confessing to holding his son captive, and arranging a meeting the next afternoon. He threatened to eliminate Young H-won's beloved son if he didn't reveal the location of the secret lab. After the call, he threw the phone into the river and returned to discuss the next move with his adoptive father. Meanwhile, Young-sik continued to monitor Yi Woong's every move, unaware that Yi Woong had already detected his surveillance. He also overheard Yi Woong's subsequent call to Min-ho. A while later, Hai-won sought out Young-woo and asked to join him. He agreed to let her follow him, but she had to accept that her father was one of the perpetrators. The goal of the White Knight organization's experiments was immortality. The next morning, Hai-won took Jamie out for spicy food, even though Jamie didn't like it. Sure enough, after one bite, she couldn't handle the heat. Fortunately, the perceptive restaurant owner, sizing up the situation with a glance, immediately brought out some water. There, Jamie revealed that she was Young-woo's sister, and expressed her hope that they could work together to bring White Knight to justice. At the same time, the police chief was being threatened by Young H-won with the information that his son was being held captive. Upon hearing this, he immediately went to Team 1 and berated his superiors. Realizing they were secretly contacting the captain, he yelled at them and left. That night, Min-ho sought out Young H-won and offered to cooperate. They wanted to quickly capture the 3 White Knight village children and rescue Young H-won's beloved son. Simultaneously, Young-woo's group was planning their search for the laboratory. First, they flew a drone around the targeted area. Then, his adoptive father cut off the power to the entire city. A human experimentation facility would require a constant power supply and therefore would likely have a large generator to maintain electricity. The place that lit up first would likely be the secret laboratory. Using this method, they narrowed down the potential locations. The next morning, they split up to investigate these places. Noticing that the location hadn't experienced a power outage in over a decade, Young H-won immediately went to investigate. Immediately after, Young-woo appeared outside. This made them realize that the power outage wasn't accidental, but a carefully orchestrated plan by Young-woo. However, as Young H-won was about to order his men to capture him, Hyun-hee stopped him and calmly analyzed the situation. If they acted carelessly, they would reveal the location to Young-woo. After a while with no further developments, Young H-won had to return home. There, he and his adoptive father carried the boy to the rooftop and injected him with a lucid dream antidote to wake him up. Sure enough, just minutes later, the boy awoke from his dream. Meanwhile, Yi Woong discovered that Jae-wook was reporting that the recent victims were all connected to White Knight Village. He even released footage showing Yi Woong's silhouette. Seeing this, Yi Woong was furious that he hadn't killed Jae-wook the previous night. That night, Hai-won sought out her father, determined to persuade him one last time. But the result was the same. Il-do remained blindly convinced that he was doing this for the good of humanity. The time for the exchange arrived. Young-woo brought Young H-won's son to the meeting point as promised. However, when they arrived, they presented Hai-won, who had been kidnapped at some point. Seeing this, Young-woo had no choice but to release Young H-won's son. During the hostage exchange, the other side immediately turned on them. Fortunately, thanks to his adoptive father's support, none of them were able to give chase. At the same time, Jamie returned to the station to find that the entire team had been disbanded. She took her anger to the chief, but he brushed her off. With one look, she immediately recognized who was behind the disbandment. Unwilling to let the case be closed so unjustly, Jamie rallied her colleagues to continue the investigation. They were trying to locate Yi Wung. On Youngwoo's side, things were getting dire. The military, tracking a device planted in Hai-Won's clothing, was closing in. Aware of the danger, he urged everyone to escape while he single-handedly took down each pursuing soldier. Realizing their current hideout was compromised, his adoptive father proactively sought a new one. Infuriated by the failed operation, Young H-Won lashed out at Min Ho before storming off. That same night, he resumed his frantic pill-popping, hinting at a strange affliction plaguing him. Meanwhile, the supervisor returned home to find Young-woo and Hai-Won unexpectedly taking refuge there. Young-woo even offered money to stay for a few days. The high-ranking official's home seemed a safe haven. There, Young-woo revealed the White Knight organization's wrongdoings, stirring the supervisor's conscience enough to agree to help. At the same time, Hye-in-hee supplied Young H-Won with more pills, revealed to be the product of sinister experiments designed to prevent severe aging. The next morning, the brazen Min Ho contacted the supervisor for help, aware that he was Ri's next target. Overhearing this, Ri informed Young-woo, who immediately set out with her for his adoptive father's new hideout. With his military background, tracking was child's play for the older man, and he quickly pinpointed the laboratory's location. The two then began formulating a plan of action. Simultaneously, Min Yi grappled with his conscience after being tasked with disposing of the children's bodies. In the distance, Young-woo reached the lab and discovered rows of urns containing the ashes of young lives. Without hesitation, he ventured deeper inside. However, the organization, seemingly anticipating this move, had already cleared out, leaving behind only a machine designed to read Young-woo's emotions. Enraged, he slammed the device shut. Just then, Min Yi appeared and confessed his involvement, admitting he didn't know the lab's new location. Elsewhere, undercover police officers protected Min Ho, with the supervisor also present to monitor the situation. However, Yi Wung plotted to kill Yong-sik for constantly reporting his every move to Min Ho. Their plan was to eliminate him. Despite their long-standing relationship, Yi Wung ruthlessly executed Yong-sik. But upon leaving, he was ambushed by members of the White Knight organization. After confirming Min Ho's safety, Team 1 stormed Yi Wung's location, finding only Yong-sik's body. Yi Wung himself was tied up in a basement, confronted by a furious Young H-Won, enraged that Yi Wung had drugged his son's drink. Seizing the opportunity, Young H-Won sought to extract serum from Yi Wung for his experiments. Suddenly, the lights went out. Young-woo emerged from the darkness, swiftly incapacitating most of the henchmen. As the lights flickered back on, Hye-in-hee appeared, revealed to be Young-woo's biological mother. Seeing him, she hesitated. Min Yi took advantage of the moment, firing a tranquilizer dart at Young-woo. Young H-Won gloated, believing his victory secure. As a henchman approached the seemingly unconscious Young-woo, he suddenly sprang up, sending the man flying. His enhanced physiology had developed a resistance to the drug. He proceeded to mercilessly subdue the remaining henchmen. Just then, police sirens wailed. Young-woo had contacted the police chief earlier, knowing the man still cared about him. He had revealed the organization's sinister plot. The chief's sense of justice reignited, and he dispatched a wave of officers to the scene. Seeing this, Young H-Won's group quickly left. With his mother present, Young-woo also didn't want to pursue them. Just like that, they escaped the police cordon. As for the chief, when he saw Young-woo again, he was incredibly worried and even tried to take off his own coat to give to him so he wouldn't be cold. Afterwards, he personally drove him all the way home. Young-woo didn't forget to bring Yi Wung along. Seeing this, Hai-won immediately questioned why they brought the murderer back. There, Young-woo and Jamie explained that he suffered from multiple personality disorder due to a traumatic childhood. If his gentler personality could be awakened, he would be safe. The next morning, an enraged Young H-Won called, yelling at the chief for ruining his plans the night before. But this time, the chief, firmly on Young-woo's side, cursed back and hung up immediately. At the same time, his son flew into another rage. Frustrated and with no one to vent his anger on, he pinned his son to the bed and started to strangle him. Luckily, his mother intervened just in time. A few minutes later, Young Hwan summoned Min Ho for a discussion. He knew Min Ho's ambition to join Bikia's executive board, so he deceptively invited him to the lab that night to talk. Min Ho, unsuspecting, left. That night, Yi Woong woke up and became agitated. Fortunately, Yongwoo was home and quickly lulled him back to sleep. The next morning, Yongwoo went to his sister's house. He repeatedly urged her to withdraw from the case and return to America, because seeing it through would be life-threatening. But Jamie flatly refused and instead asked about their mother. Recalling her childhood, she often had nightmares. Yongwoo was always there to comfort her. However, the seemingly loving mother used her own children's bodies for experiments. Yongwoo overheard this conversation and became wary of her from then on. After their talk, they returned to Yi Woong's room. With a homemade remedy, Yongwoo easily brought back his gentle personality. But at the same time, his past memories flooded back. Meanwhile, Young Hwan was sitting by the bedside of a frightening old woman. It turned out she was his wife. It turned out he had also used the longevity drug experimentally, and the serum was taken from Yongwoo. Out of hundreds of children, only his blood was compatible. That's how Hyun-hee maintained her youthful appearance until now. But for the experiment to be 100% successful, he needed the longevity formula, and only Yongwoo knew it. That same night, Yi Woong went to the rooftop to apologize to Yongwoo. He confessed that he had tried to kill him, yet Yongwoo saved him. There, Yongwoo recounted the events of that year. He had gone back to look for Yi Woong, but when he arrived, he was nowhere to be found. After hearing this, Yi Woong forgave him. However, just minutes later, Yongwoo's head felt like it was exploding, and his nose bled continuously, causing him immense pain. The surrounding lights began to flicker violently. A mirror shattered. Fortunately, his adoptive father heard the commotion and came to his rescue. As for Hye-won, she was still determined to dissuade her father one last time, but the result remained unfavorable. He still insisted that the experiments were for the benefit of humanity. Knowing his desire for the longevity formula from Yongwoo, Hye-won tricked him. The next morning, he went to meet Yongwoo. Indeed, the two met and began to negotiate. He agreed to give the formula to Eagle, but in return, they had to tell him the location of the lab once it was successful. Seeing a good deal, he quickly agreed and left, unaware that Hye-won had planted a tracker in his glasses. When he got back, he put on his glasses, and the formula appeared. Based on that, Il-do perfected his experiment. However, he still needed a test subject before using it. So he immediately lured Min Ho to the laboratory. Upon hearing this, Min Ho was overjoyed, believing it to be true. Little did he know that upon arrival, he would be electrocuted. However, the formula still lacked the serum of someone from the White Knight village, so Young Hwan immediately thought of his subordinate, Min-ye. When Min-ye arrived as ordered, he was immediately ambushed. However, Yongwoo appeared just in time to rescue him. It turned out they had planned everything the night before. Everything that had happened so far was a charade orchestrated by the two of them. There, Yongwoo unequivocally exposed Young Hwan's true identity. He was the leader of the Bikia organization. Previously, he was the commander-in-chief of the army, and later killed his own son to usurp his position. He then used an experimental longevity drug to maintain a youthful appearance, easily deceiving others and continuing to hold on to wealth and power. Upon hearing this, Young Hwan panicked and ordered his subordinates to attack. However, against Yongwoo, ordinary people were mere mosquitoes. At the same time, Min Ho realized he had been experimented on. But no matter how much he struggled, it was too late. When the drug was injected, he immediately convulsed and died. Just by looking, Hyun-hee realized that only Yongwoo's serum could be used to complete the perfect longevity drug. She immediately called Yongwoo to inform him of this. Under her threat, he dared not act rashly. However, the fear in his voice made Hyun-hee realize something was wrong. Sure enough, the organization ordered the military to arrest Jamie. At this time, Yongwoo was still unaware, chatting with Min-ye. Just then, Yi Woong also arrived to meet with them. As for Jamie, she was also brought to see her mother. Seeing her mother's unchanged expression after all these years, she couldn't contain her emotions and teared up. However, in Hyeon-hee's eyes, there was only the longevity experiment. She sedated Jamie and sent a picture to threaten Young-woo. Realizing he couldn't act alone this time, he gathered everyone to ask for help. Everyone who knew the situation agreed, and thus, a Justice League was formed. The next morning, they began to carry out their plan. Following Young H-won's testimony, they found the location of the laboratory. The youngest member went back to inform the chief to provide support. Upon receiving the news, he didn't delay, mobilizing all his forces. At the same time, Hyeon-hee was delighted to see Young-woo. She then demanded to extract his serum, threatening to harm Jamie otherwise. However, it was also the time for Young H-won to take his medicine. But Young-woo had anticipated this and left the medicine in the car. It was too risky for Young H-won to go outside now, so Hyeon-hee reassured him to wait a little longer. Seeing this, Young H-won, unable to do anything, started trashing the place. While Hyeon-hee was processing Young-woo's serum, Yi-woong's group was hacking into the organization's computer system to disable and erase the entire longevity drug formula. At this time, Young H-won's body was aging rapidly, causing him intense discomfort. Just then, Yi-woong's group successfully deleted the entire formula, meaning they had only managed to create a single dose. Young-woo immediately threatened that the drug was poisoned. If Young H-won didn't believe him, he could try it himself. Hearing this, Young H-won, fearing death, ran out to the car to find the medicine. However, due to his rapid aging, Young H-won collapsed and died. Jae-wook simultaneously filmed this scene and broadcast it to the public. Down in the basement, Young-woo managed to break free from his restraints and turned towards his mother just as she was about to inject herself. A surge of anguish washed over him. Deep down, he still couldn't believe his mother didn't love him and his sibling. Painful memories of the tragic incident resurfaced, tormenting Young-woo. The lights around them flickered, and the room's contents vibrated violently. Finally, the monster took control of Young-woo's body. With a single flick of his wrist, Ming-yi was flung against the wall. The guards who attempted to fire their weapons met the same fate. With such terrifying power, no one was a match for him. He even effortlessly blocked a sneak attack from Hyeon-hee without even looking. Seeing the monster growing increasingly menacing, Hae-won bravely stepped forward to stop it. However, she was like an ant before the monster, who grabbed her by the throat. Fortunately, Jamie's voice, along with memories of White Knight Village, allowed Young-woo to fight for control of his body. Under the immense strain, the surrounding lights exploded. There was no time for pleasantries, though, as the basement's self-destruct sequence had been activated. After getting everyone out, the door sealed shut. Young-woo chose to stay behind with his mother. Seeing this, Min-yi had no choice but to lead Jamie and Hae-won outside. Everyone anxiously waited for their captain, but just as the first tear rolled down Young-woo's face, the entire laboratory exploded. Everyone stood there, stunned, mourning Young-woo's immense sacrifice. Once again, he had become a hero. With the case closed, Yo was taken into custody by Hae-won. Yi-woong also confessed, turning himself in to atone for his other personality's actions. Jamie visited him in jail, asking why he didn't plead insanity. He simply replied that he wanted to make amends for the innocent victims. Their conversation ended there. Jamie packed her bags and headed to the airport to return to the United States. Hae-won went to see her off, promising to meet again soon on behalf of Young-woo. Back in Korea, Hae-won visited Young-woo's adoptive father. In the car, she noticed the wrapper of the lollipop he often ate. Back at the station, she discovered that the adoptive father's car had been seen near the lab's rear entrance at the time of the explosion. She immediately contacted Jae-wook for help. After hearing her explanation, he agreed to investigate. Some time later, Hae-won was promoted to captain. On her first day, Jae-wook arrived early to congratulate her. He also shared information about the village. Someone had clearly seen a young man carrying a young woman up the hill to live there. He kept calling her mother, even though they looked the same age. Jae-wook went to investigate, but he was too late. Young-woo had already left with his mother. Soon after, Team 1 welcomed a new member. He was very enthusiastic, even taking on a murderer single-handedly. Unfortunately, the criminal took a hostage on the street. Suddenly, a billboard fell on the perpetrator's head. To onlookers, it seemed like a coincidence, but Hai-1 recognized her former captain's methods. A familiar figure disappeared into the crowd. As she turned away, Young-woo did indeed appear. Only one thing was different. His lollipop was now blue.